Yes, folks, hello, welcome once again to MoDXtra Games and Collectibles. It's time for another action figure collector thought of the day. This is where I go quick and dirty with my phone camera and my portable microphone. Usually do these when I've set my desk up at home to work from home the next day. Let's just run a bit freestyle and talk about whatever kind of weird adult collector thought is going through my mind at the time. And as you probably gathered by the thumbnail today, we're circling back round to the old Hasbro price conversation, the cost of being an adult collector and buying Hasbro collectibles in particular. Of course, regulars around these parts will know is a subject I've talked about before. I've discussed price sensitivity from the G.I. Joe Classified series perspective, discussed the Lara Croft figure, for example, and whether I felt like the cost married up to my perceived value of the figure. And that's kind of the heart of my argument, really, is that it all boils down to perceived value versus your budget. You know, if you want it and you can afford it and you see value in it, you're going to buy it, whatever the price. I've certainly done it before, but then at other times you might not perceive the value in it. You might think the cost is too high for the value you're getting, and you walk away. Is the reason why I've scaled back my Marvel Legends purchases quite significantly, because I don't see the value in it compared to the cost. But my mate Stu over on Universal Toy Collector did a video titled "Is Hasbro Now Taking the Piss?" Which they are, and I'm going to share why in a minute. But because the cost sensitivity, the price sensitivity conversation is going on over on the Star Wars collector side of things as well, like Black Series and in this instance TVC. I think you'll soon realise I don't collect Star Wars stuff, so I don't know what I'm talking about. But I think it's the INT4 set that has ignited or amplified the conversation more on that side of the fence, or that quarter of the the action brand collecting consumers. And from what I can gather, this situation's got a bit wild because I saw the Nacelle Toys dude, what's his name, Brian something or other, do his video about Mr. Stevie, who's like the public face, an individual who works for Hasbro as the public face, talks around the Star Warsy stuff, talks a lot about the Star Warsy stuff, who, as a result of this kind of weird situation where the price was really high and there was some funny stuff about what was said against what was advertised, ended up receiving a bombardment of complaints. In fact, I heard a rumor he'd also received threats to the point where he shut down his personal social media accounts in order to, quell the storm, to quieten the storm in his life. So there's kind of several layers to the chat today, I suppose, that I'm presenting to you. You've got the layer around the Hasbro cost situation, the price situation of being an adult collector, buying their products, and the impact that that's having and what's going on there. But then you've got that kind of secondary layer around sort of consumer response, fan response, what's right, what's wrong in that space, and what that kind of means. And hopefully I can bring some interesting perspectives to that. In fact, knowing that, I am, generally kind of economic and financially illiterate when it comes to these types of things, I am fortunate enough to work for an organization that has, on the payroll, published doctors in finance and economics, professional people, published financial analysts who are really good in their field. And so I reached out to one that I was friendly with at work and asked her to take a look at the Hasbro situation in the hope that she can give me some extra little flavor to add in this video. And I think she has. If I've interpreted the email she sent me correctly, I'm pointing at my iPad with the email on it. If I've interpreted the email she sent me correctly, and I'm going to regurgitate it to you accurately. So let's see. So, Andrea, if you do watch this and I have slaughtered or misinterpreted your comments, I am going to read literal quotes straight out your email. Then, I don't know, catch me at work, clip me in the corridor, let me know. You're never going to watch this, folks. Not in a million years. But hopefully I have correctly interpreted her comments that I'm going to use to add some extra flavor to this video. So let's get down to the first bit. Let's talk about the cost increase, the price increases, the cost, and the additional pressure that that's applying now to adult collectors and their budgets and the perceived value stuff. Because the fact is, undeniably, the prices are going up. And my friend Stu, in his argument, presenting his argument, are Hasbro taking the piss? Well, the fact is that yes, they are. I'll circle back around some of the counter arguments to that around, are they taking the piss? Well, no, they're not, because of licensing fees and increased costs and blah, 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 blah. Because the simple fact of the matter is, as consumers, we are not their customers. We're not their customers. In fact, we're the product that they sell to their customers, because the name of the game at Hasbro and we know this, I've spoken about it before, is shareholder return, shareholder expectation, shareholder value, shareholder return. In fact, in their financial reports that they put out, one's just recently been published back in July, um, they state clearly that they are explicitly managing the Hasbro organization around the shareholder returns, the shareholder expectations. Now, that's not to say that the folks who are arguing, increased production costs, increased supply chain costs, increased marketing costs, things like that, are contributing to the price increases. That's not to say that they're incorrect. Undoubtedly, they are contributing to the price increases. In fact, I've no doubt about it at all. I think that is an objective fact. The thing is that when you think about the price of the product and you take out these are our production costs and these are our administrative costs and these are our supply chain costs, and then here's the royalties that we pay to the licensor and all that kind of stuff. The margin is reducing, of course, isn't it? The margin of profit is reducing, and what they're not sacrificing, is the shareholder value in that. So the costs are increasing for Hasbro, but they're increasing their prices to maintain the profit margins that then go onto the balance sheet, which then contribute to the shareholder value. But the key thing is, again, remember, they are explicitly managing their organization to maintain and improve that shareholder value. So, those who are saying, well, this is just greed, Hasbro greed, are absolutely right. It is just Hasbro greed because they are working for the shareholders, not the consumers. The shareholders are the customers. Their consumers are the product that they are selling to their shareholders. Obviously it's more complex than that, but for a better way of putting it. And they're absolutely not ever going to sacrifice shareholder value. So my friend in her email, she pointed out a couple of things. She said that Hasbro have an awful lot of debt and they've committed to paying down that debt. They're also taking steps to get more cash on hand to buy back shares. And they've been on a campaign, we all know this, they've been on a campaign to improve the bottom line operating costs. They're cost cutting, and they're placing each of their kind of portfolio items. So you've got, what have you got? You've got Hasbro consumer products, you've got Hasbro like Wizards of the Coast and the digital gaming bit, and then that entertainment wing and licensing wing, haven't they? So in each of those spaces, all the various portfolio of products, so Wizards of the Coast, Magic the Gathering, D&D, in the consumer products, Transformers, Nerf, Peppa Pig, whatever, blah, 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 G.I. Joe Classified. They all have to justify the resources and the costs that are being put into them against the revenue generation that it produces so that it can maintain profit margins that maintain the shareholder value, that increase cash, on hand to buy back shares, to increase cash on hand to pay back debt. And all three of those are about shareholder return. You pay down the debt, there's more value in the organization. You buy back the shares, the people who still have shares get an increased share value. And of course, bottom line operating costs improves the input to output profit and loss statement. And hey, you know what? We're talking about it in the adult action figure collecting space, but it's very clear. And again, Andrew has pointed that out for me, that when you look at their the financial reporting and their shareholder reports and such like, Wizards of the Coast, Magic the Gathering in particular, is doing all the heavy lifting. All the heavy lifting. The consumer brands aren't operating at a profit right now, and the digital and the entertainment stuff, the bottom's just fallen out of it. In fact, they've had to do a big write-off of a load of stuff there. And even in their workhorse space, Wizards of the Coast, with the D&D and the Magic the Gathering stuff, they are also aggressively monetizing over there. In the first instance, Magic the Gathering is a low production cost to retail value and profit margin compared to, say, an action figure. But they're also, producing all these different kind of cross-licensed versions of Magic the Gathering, the pace and rate of set releases coming out, ancillary products, all that kind of good stuff. So you can walk in the shop and you can buy Marvel Magic the Gathering, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Magic the Gathering, Avatar: The Last Airbender, Magic the Gathering, So they're aggressively monetizing that space there. But they're also, despite the fact that it's lower production costs and better profit margins, but they're also doing this kind of digital first strategy around D&D. So they're going to be moving it online and introducing microtransactions and a kind of online subscription service, which is going to more aggressively monetize their D&D fans, so they're monetizing it more and more and more. So even in the space of the organization that's doing all the heavy lifting, the workhorse that's pulling the carriage forward, they're monetizing even more heavily. And we have to accept and understand that we are actually, the weight on the back of the cart. There's a dead weight just hanging off the back of the cart, and that's the adult action figure stuff. Now, if they're going to aggressively monetize that stuff that's doing well, then of course they're going to aggressively monetize us, which takes me back to my point that the prices are going up because yes, production costs are going up. Yes, supply chain and shipping costs are going up. Yes, marketing costs are going up. Salaries for employees are going up. All the stuff that's happening, in the world right now economically is affecting productions, but the price is creeping up to maintain that little shareholder little bit in there to maintain the shareholder value, because they want to raise cash to pay down the debt, they want to raise cash to buy back the shares, and they want to raise cash to give fat dividends to shareholders. And the simple fact of the matter is the C-suite at Hasbro are incentivized to run the organization that way because, again, at least as I'm told, their remuneration packages are structured around improving shareholder value. So for us on the outside, it looks like chaos. It looks like they're making bad decisions, that they're ignoring what their customers want. But actually, from the inside, they're making good decisions, they're being financially disciplined, and they are giving their customers what they want because their customers are their shareholders and their investors. Just repeat what I said before. It's greed. They're working for their shareholders, not for their customers, not for their consumers. Now, of course, from our perspective, that short-term kind of financially disciplined thinking around shareholder value, around shareholder finance, what that doesn't factor in is the things that are important to us, like the brand perception and the maintenance of the IP in a way that connects to our passions and our nostalgias and the stuff that's driving our collecting habits. They're not meeting our requirements around customer desires. How many times you see massive conversations about why is this character not come out yet? I want this character. They're ignoring collector goodwill. They're ignoring fan satisfaction. All the stuff that's important to us. Is kind of secondary or tertiary to the financial discipline around the short-term thinking. Well, not just short-term thinking. They are also, thinking about the long-term financial sustainability of the organization, but they're thinking about the long-term financial sustainability of the organization from a shareholder return point of view. They're not going to do anything, folks. They're not going to do anything that makes it better for the consumer, because the consumer is the product that they are selling to their shareholders, who are their actual customers, and they're not going to sacrifice any shareholder value. Which then brings us to, back to the kind of initial ignition point for this thought, which was my friend Stu video and, some festering thoughts that I'd had from previously thinking about this stuff. The Mr. Stevie situation is shit. That should never have happened. Those who have complained aggressively directly to Mr. Stevie or even threatened him are making us all look bad. And you should hang your heads in shame and feel apologetic. I agree with Nacelle Toys man, whatever his name is, Brian, I want to say Velk. It's not a good look. Not a good look at all. Because at the end of the day, Mr. Stevie, putting aside, any perspective you might have about him being a Hasbro shill and he's Hasbro loyal and all that stuff, putting aside all that and his company line and blah 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 blah, at the end of the day, Mr. Stevie is just a dude doing a job. He's just a dude doing a job. He's like you and me. We're just dudes doing jobs, looking to pay our mortgages and keep the lights on and feed the kids and maybe afford a holiday for a couple of weeks in the year, and buy some action figures, you know what I mean? Sustain our hobbies. He's just a dude doing a job. He's just a dude doing a job. And, you can question whether in the meeting rooms and the conference rooms of Hasbro, he's standing up and saying, I don't think the fan base is going to go for that. and getting shouted down or whatever, his only recourse is to, sure, get on with it and do his job and do what he's paid to do, which many of us do. I do it here on this, on the, right now on this video. I do it. I just do, I'll challenge my boss, but then at the end of the day, it's their decision, or resign. And, going back to what I said before, if he's got a mortgage to pay and he's got kids to feed or whatever, then that might not be quite as easy an option as we might like it to be. So to send threats to some dude who's just doing his job because he happens to be this kind of public face is just objectively wrong. It's just objectively wrong. Express to him your feedback in a constructive way, but yeah, if it's happened to the extent where he's felt the need to, shut down, put a wall up, and go quiet in the noise, then that's not good, guys. Equally, though, I do somewhat understand where this is coming from. The furore. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. Around all this stuff, even though I don't think it excuses that behaviour, or making snide comments on my mate Stu's video. Even though I don't think it excuses it, I kind of get where it's coming from, because this is about the passion around this stuff. Because as I've said before, the kind of whole thing, men crying over toys, blah 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 blah, so the price has gone up, whatever, dismisses and does not acknowledge that in the kind of wider context of reality, the economic and the socio-economic situation we find ourselves in the world right now, where the price of everything is going up and the pressures are increasing and the air just feels toxic sometimes, or literally, I've had wildfires just around the corner, filling the air with smoke. The things that allow us to escape, the things that allow us to, nostalgically jump back to those halcyon days where we were just kids playing with toys on living room carpets, the things that bring us joy, the things that distract us from reality and entertain us. So, challenge our imagination, spark our imagination, and so we can play and take photos and be artistic and all that stuff. When the real world situation of price increases then start to encroach on that, and you can't afford the thing that's helping you stay afloat and mentally healthy, because you can't afford the other things, it sits heavy and hard. And so the emotion is strong, the passion is strong, and I think folks saying, oh, it's just men crying over toys, whatever, wow, get over it, or, oh, it's just the way of the world right now, prices are going up, so that's just what it is, just stop collecting if it's that hard, and all that kind of stuff. Or bombarding, or bombarding a guy with your complaints. It's all driven by that passion. Again, I don't think it excuses those situations, but it explains those situations, because then the misery you feel is stronger. The sadness that it might be something that is no longer in your grasp. And then in that wider context, that is being driven by greed, corporate greed, no less, which is a very topical kind of worldwide, very topical kind of point of discussion around wealth inequality and stuff. It sits heavy. It's miserable. It's making it hard. The thing that makes life easier is now becoming harder itself. And it's not just for us. Like I say, Magic the Gathering folks have been complaining about what's going on with their card game. Tabletop board game folks have been complaining about it. I'm sure, I've said this before, the price of hockey sticks and, whatever, all you, like, people who do crafts, artists, people who do sports, all this joy, all the stuff that helps us stay mentally healthy, is being taken away. So it's driven by the passion. And I don't think it's fair. I think it's dismissive to say, stop being a man crying over toys, or, you don't know what you're talking about and all that kind of stuff, because that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. If the thing brought you joy in the first place and it's being taken away from you by something that's outside of your control, and it was the thing that was helping you, get through life, that was your entertainment, folks who go to the pictures, who've stopped going to the pictures because they can't afford the cinema prices anyway, it's that stuff. It's that stuff, and that's important. That's important. I just think there's a space to be kinder to one another, I just think there's more room to be kinder to one another. And also not to target people who are just dudes doing jobs. It's not Mr. Stevie's fault. It's got nothing to do with him. It's the shareholders. It's the shareholder expectations and the way that they've structured their C-suite incentives to treat them as the customers, not their consumers as the customers. And I suppose that's it. I've kind of burnt out there. I've burnt out them. I don't know. There is more content here that my friend has provided me with regards to them paying down the debt and buying back the shares and what that means. I'm struggling to interpret it as a layman. So let me know in the comments down below if you're more knowledgeable on that front. You know what that means. But nonetheless, thank you, Andrea, for your help. I like to try and be balanced and add another little layer or two if I can. But yeah, the prices are going up. It sucks. It does suck. They are taking the piss. You know, whether you foresaw this or not 10 years ago, or whether you you already jumped ship and you know, buying another product by another manufacturer that feels treating you more right, then, well done you. Good for you. That's fine. But don't dismiss and diminish, number one, that what brings me joy, and that's fine. Just as much as what brings you joy, that's fine. And remember that it's important to have this stuff in your life. It's important. It is consumerism at the end of the day, but I like playing with toys. I like being a man-child. It helps me get by. And the price increases, the cost increases are making it harder. So there you go. All right. So what was the point of that? I don't know. Just be kinder to each other, I suppose. But thanks for watching, folks, anyway. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, as always. Otherwise, have yourselves a great day. Have yourselves a great week, and swing back around for another video sometime soon. It'd be my pleasure to have you. All right? Take it easy, folks.